And once again, would you join me in giving thanks to God for the children doing a great job telling us the story today? Yes. I'll also say this, they call, a pastor a shepherd, but you know what? The adults are part of this today, that is really shepherding. Because there was a lot of running, a lot of maneuvering, and so thank you to the folks who facilitated this. Clay, you just look like a sheep back there. Yeah, so there's certain narratives, stories that American culture loves to tell. You know it probably. Number one would be the comeback story, right? Somebody that gets knocked down and gets back up again. Another narrative would be David versus Goliath. We love the little guy taking on the big guy. But there's another one that we love, and that's, people from small towns, little towns, rising to greatness, to do great things. A number of years ago, the story of Bill Clinton rising up from Hope, Arkansas was a story that really caught on. Former President Ronald Reagan coming from little Eureka College is a story that folks love. I remember playing football against Eureka College, and it was all over the place that this is Ronald Reagan's old stomping grounds. Well, as you've heard the children tell the story today, the birth of Jesus Christ is another of those small town narratives. Someone rising from a small town to do great things. It's why way back in the Old Testament, the prophet Micah says these words, "You, Bethlehem, though you are small, out of you will come for me one who is ruler over Israel." Now, people in the Old Testament probably heard those words and said, "A king coming from Bethlehem? No way. That podunk town? No way." About 5 miles south of Jerusalem sat the small town of Bethlehem. And in the first century, 5 miles away was by no means a suburb. Think small town. Think small town. Think one stoplight and a McDonald's. I compared it once jokingly to Marengo. And somebody said, "Hey, I'm from Marengo." So I won't compare it to anything other than to say Bethlehem is this small town. And out of this small town rises Jesus. So why, God, have Jesus come from Bethlehem? Here the promise is given. You, Bethlehem, though you are small, out of you will come the ruler. Why Bethlehem? Does God have a small town bias? I don't think so. Is he trying to spread the wealth equally? Hardly. So why Bethlehem? It's revealing from the very beginning. It's setting the tone for the type of God and King we'll have. He's not the big city only, splashy event only, big crowd only type of God. He's not the type of God who sits high on a throne and waits for people to come to him, but he's a God who comes down even to Bethlehem. I remember visiting someone who was a senior citizen, unable to continue to keep coming to worship. So they were unable to continue to receive the Lord's Supper. So I would visit her regularly, bring the Lord's Supper to her. And every visit she would go over and over, "Thank you, Pastor, for bringing me the Lord's Supper." After a while, I listened, but then I finally chimed in and I said, "Thank you for being so appreciative. But this is what God's gifts do. They come down to us. They meet us in hospital rooms and home family rooms and nursing homes. This is the promise of Christmas, the gift of Christmas. Emmanuel, that God came down to us." And the kids are telling the story in a powerful way. It started there with Jesus, humble beginnings in Bethlehem, and really it continued. Think about it, he chooses a vocation, a carpenter, that involves hands-on service. In his ministry, he deals with lepers who society and the church have left behind. In his ministry, he interacts with a woman at a well who no one will talk to. In his ministry, he talks to a man who is so hated by the community, he's hiding in a tree. This is the promise of Christmas, that God came down to be with us. And it continues even to his death. God, the King, mocked, beaten, and crucified for us, so that we can have peace with God. God came down. It's the promise of Christmas, the gift of Christmas. So friends, today, don't ever think that your problems are too big for God. Don't ever think that God's way up there and has no time for you. Or that God's way up there and is not going to make room for what's going on in your life. Because that's what his birth in tiny Bethlehem proves. Friends, 2,000 years ago, not only in a podunk town, Bethlehem, but it's in a stable with smelly, loud animals. And it's in a manger bed. But Kurt, show them the picture. This is what I'm talking about. That's a king-size bed. That's a king-size bed. Amen? Let's stand and pray.